Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not also blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying, 'We see,' so your sin remains." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise the Lord. Friday was, of course, the Feast of St. Patrick, and I hope you celebrated accordingly. I had some corned beef on that day, very good. And on this occasion, I want to speak about St. Patrick and what he encountered in 5th century Ireland and how he responded to that, and then also about what we encounter today and how we should respond to what we face. So when St. Patrick went to Ireland, there were Christians there, but they were spread out and they were in small communities, and most of that island was wrapped in the darkness of paganism. They were spiritually blind, and it was especially with this religion called Druidism, which, if the accounts are to be believed, was rather dark, cruel, and we might just say satanic. And so St. Patrick walked into that situation on the island of Ireland, and he saw that the leaders too were wrapped up in all of this. And within the church itself, there was a lot of disorder. There weren't enough priests, there weren't enough bishops. Communication with other countries was difficult, and in other parts of the world, the Roman Empire was collapsing, causing societal chaos. So there was a lot of problems that St. Patrick was walking into. And yet, how did he respond to it? Well, as any Christian should respond, with faith, hope, and love. He had a lively faith, a firm hope, and an ardent love. And his faith, we hear, was not very strong when he was a youth. At 16, that's when he was captured by pirates and made a slave in Ireland. And during that time, he acknowledges that he really didn't know his faith. And he said, "And I didn't listen to the priests." So some things never change, right? He didn't listen to the priest. And so now here he is, all alone in a foreign land, a slave, and he begins to pray. Tells us that he prayed 100 times every day, and at least that many times during the night. And his heart was changed. And he received the gift of faith. And then after 6 years, he walked 200 miles to the sea and got on a ship and escaped. And then he made his way back home. And there, someone began to disciple him and to teach him about the faith. And he received it very well, because we know that when he went back to Ireland, he had such a deep faith. In his confession, which he wrote at the end of his life, like every other sentence is a quote from sacred scripture. So we know that St. Patrick had a very firm and lively faith. He also had a firm hope. You know, he says that for 12 different times he faced death on that island. And he said, "Every day I face murder, fraud, and captivity." And more than that, he also faced ridicule, suspicion, people rejected him, and all of these things he said, but none of that made me afraid, because I knew of the promise of heaven. And because of that, he was able to see through all the difficulties that came about in his life with courage. And then finally, he had an ardent charity. The reason why St. Patrick went back to Ireland was that one night he had a dream, and this man named Victoricus appeared to him in the dream, and this man was from Ireland, and he had all these letters, and he approached St. Patrick and said, "Come back and walk among us once again, holy youth." And so St. Patrick was moved, and he said, "I love those people. I want to go back and share with them the gospel of Jesus, the gospel of liberation." And so he went back. That's why he went. And then he says at the end of his life, he says to the people, "I labored for you with great love for the salvation of your souls." So we know faith, hope, and love, that was a part of St. Patrick's life. And he found remarkable success. Sometimes they talk about it in terms of miracles, that St. Patrick drove out all the snakes on the island, which is just a legend. But he really did have an immense effect on the people there. And there was a rapid conversion of those people from paganism to the Christian faith, and it was really widespread throughout the island. And one of the most remarkable things is it happened all without bloodshed. In other places, when they brought the Christian faith to people, there was martyrdom. But in Ireland, there was no martyrdom. They found great success in numbers. So what are we facing today, and how can we encounter that? Well, St. Paul tells us, he says in the second reading, you were once darkness, but now you are in the light of the Lord. You were once darkness. Now, we live in a Christian society, or the remains of a Christian society, so we don't have the same kind of problems that St. Patrick walked into. However, today, as I've said many times, there are many people that are walking away from Jesus Christ and his church, and many people are walking back from light into darkness, from spiritual sight into spiritual blindness. And people are doing this willingly. Some people are even trying to go back to paganism. And you can even look this up on YouTube, although maybe you shouldn't. But the people will tell you, this is how you become a Druid. How you become a Druid, that's a terrible idea, okay? That's what St. Patrick delivered us from. But people are going backwards. And so that's not good. That's not good. And in the church, we also have a lot of disorder at this time. There are bishops and cardinals saying things that are really wrong and heretical. And even like the entire German bishops are trying to drag their church into apostasy. So there's a lot of bad things happening in our day. But what should we do? Well, one thing St. Paul says is have no connection to the fruitless works of darkness, but rather reveal them. But we should respond to our day the same way that Patrick responded to his day, which is through the virtues of faith, hope, and charity. So I think that we really need to have a firm belief in God's revelation, in sacred scripture, in apostolic tradition. We need to stake our lives on this and know that this is true, and this is something that is very powerful, because truth has this powerful effect. And we need to be able to proclaim the truth in love, as I said last week, knowing that maybe people don't like to hear it, but this is what they do need to hear. And we need to have that firm faith. And then we also need to have a firm hope as well, like St. Patrick. Because the heaven that he desired is the same heaven that we desire. The hell that he feared is the same hell that we fear. And the God that made the promises to him is the same God that made the promises to us. So we should be confident in that. St. Augustine said, in the world, there's good days and bad days, but with God, there's only good days. And so that's the kind of attitude that we need to cultivate, even if we face difficulties, rejection, ridicule, those kind of things. And we need to do everything out of love for people. St. Paul tells us in his second letter to the Corinthians, he says, the love of Christ urges us on. That was the motto of the seminary that I went to, Caritas Christi urget nos. The love of Christ is what presses us onward. And so out of love for people, out of love for their salvation, we need to do the things that can help them out. And so will we find success? I don't know. We'll see. We have a little bit of a harder situation, and C.S. Lewis put it this way. He said, the first proclamation of the gospel, what St. Patrick was engaged in, was kind of like a young man trying to win the heart of a young lady. But he said, what we're facing, the re-proclamation of the gospel, is kind of like a man trying to win back a cynical divorcee to their marriage. It's a much harder task, but we can do it. And so Mother Teresa finally told us that we are not called to be successful necessarily, we're called to be faithful. So in our day, just like in St. Patrick's Day, whatever we face, the difficulties that are ahead of us, we should face it with faith, hope, and love as Christians.